I'm re-siding my home with Hardie plank, and sister and I are going to put the first course of Hardie plank on. We put the starter strip on. James Hardie calls for 1 1/4 inch starter strip. After we cut it, I primed it and painted it. We used hot dip galvanized nails to put up the starter strip. We left a gap between the starter strip and the trim, just in case water gets behind the siding, so it can drip down and out. I put a little bit of this pest plug. It's 100% stainless steel wool between the gap of the starter strip and the trim, so that water can drip out, but little pests and bugs can't get in. This pest plug keeps out mice, spiders, other bugs. There you go, that's the pest plug. This pest plug is good stuff if you have a rodent problem. If they chew on this, they cut their little mouths and then they leave it alone. So if you have a problem with rats or mice getting in, this is good stuff. Any holes or voids you have around your home, I'd fill it with this pest plug. Hardie plank calls for an 1/8 inch gap between the Hardie plank and the trim. This paint stick is 1/8 of an inch thick, so we're going to be using these as spacers. When we set the corner trim, I blind caulked or back caulked with Vulcan 116. We really like that sealant. If you use the Vulcan 116, which is an exterior sealant only, you have to wait between 3 days to a week before you can paint it. It takes that long to dry. It depends on the thickness of the bead that you put on whatever you're putting on. When we put the trim on, we used GRK trim screws. We used the 2.5 inch to go into the sheathing, and we used the 2 inch to screw the Hardie trim to the Hardie trim. We also use these Everbuilt screws for the same purpose. These GRK trim screws don't have a beveled head on them. They also don't have what are called reverse threads up the top here. These Everbuilt, I don't know if you can see that reverse thread right up at the top there. It has that, and it has a beveled head. 3 of these Torx bits out of these containers snapped clean off in the heads of those screws. You probably can't see it, but the very tip of that bit snapped off in the head of the screw. We had to use a magnet and some dental tools to get out 2 of the heads, and the other one we couldn't get out, so it's raised above the trim, and we caulked that. So if you're going to use these on the Hardie trim, be careful. I want to add that we did pre-drill each hole for the screws, so we shouldn't have had the resistance we had. And I do not think that the heads of those bits should have snapped off. It's just they make cheap junk now. I'll caution you guys. This piece of Hardie trim is bowed. So what we did was screwing up the top first, and then we pulled it over at the bottom so that we can make that corner just as flush as we could. So what we're going to do now is set our first row of Hardie plank. To set our Hardie plank level, we made these 2 jigs. I'm setting my Hardie plank down 1/2 inch from the sheathing. So this piece of wood is 1/2 inch. Here's how they work for us. Because that's 1/2 inch, that piece of wood, we put that flush on the sheathing. The Hardie plank will then overlap that starter strip and rest right on this piece of the wood of that jig. We're using these to start our level row, our first row of Hardie plank. Once it's dropped to 1/2 inch below the sheathing, one of us will put a nail in that Hardie plank in a pre-drilled hole. Then we're going to use a level and make sure that row of Hardie plank is level across the building. If we get tired as we're setting this first row of Hardie plank, we have these pieces of wood for us to rest that plank on, and I've put a little Hardie wrap tape on that so it won't abrade the bottom of the plank that I've already painted. The most important row of Hardie plank to set level is the first row. This is a box for my telephone or internet. We've been removing this and putting it back on as we need to. I bring your attention to this for this reason. When this was put on this home, a screw was put there and right down there. There was no caulking put on that screw. And when I removed the other siding, there was a lot of water damage that had occurred over a very short period of time because there was no caulking or flashing put here or there, or where the wires come through, because the wires on this box come through the sheathing and go to the interior of my garage. I'm going to use some Vulcan on the inside of my garage and push it out this way to stop any water from coming into that sheathing. And that Vulcan's pretty good. I think I can squeeze it out to cover the void of this hole. So if you have a utility come out to put something on the side of your building, ask them to caulk it or flash it, or you do that yourself, or you'll have water damage that goes into your building. We only put on one row of Tyvek because we have a strong wind that comes from the south. And when we tried to put on more the other day, it just flopped around everywhere. So we're putting on one row as we go. We have our nailing lines here. Remember to mark your nailing lines on your sheathing and on the Tyvek too, and down on the concrete. We're using this bit. It's 7/64 to pre-drill holes in the Hardie plank before we put it up. We're going to use these gecko gauges after we have the first row of Hardie planks set and level to put up the rest of the Hardie plank. I'm going for a 7-inch reveal. That's why it's set right there. We've pre-marked where the studs are, and Sister is pre-drilling the holes for the fasteners. Sister likes 3/4 from the top of the plank, so that's what we're going. If you pre-drill, reach behind the plank and knock off the residue where it can stand out that plank just a bit. All right, y'all, watch Sister do some magic here.
Let it come this way. There we go. Nice and plumb over here. I'm going to want to check it with a different level, so just for good measure. That looks really good. Yeah, okay, now. It looks really good like that. If anything, it'd be high there. Let me get on over there and check it out.
It says a little more. It's really close, but it would say like right there. All right, y'all, we filmed this on a tripod, but it's so hot out here, it killed the phone. So here's what we did. We brought the plank over and we used our jigs to set that plank. Once we got it to where we wanted it, 1/2-inch drop, Sister put a nail in over there. And she used this paint stick to gap the plank to the trim. Once she put one nail in, I was on the opposite side with our jig, bringing that plank up and down as she used this level to start leveling the plank. Once we got the plank level, we then put in one more nail right there. So now we have our first row of Hardie plank level, and now we're going to move on to the next. To do this, we used a 4-foot level and a 6-foot level. I spoke with somebody at James Hardie. He said if you have 7/16 plywood or OSB, you can drive in the fastener anywhere in the field. We have double layers of plywood over here that, when together, equal 3/4. We did that because where you see that siding meeting the plywood, there's an offset or a board laying on its side, a 2x4 standing proud this way. So in order to have a smooth transition, we added plywood down here. That's the same thickness as that siding up there, also accounting for the 2x4 on its side that's standing out proud. So it's a lot of words to say we can nail anywhere in this field we want because of the double plywood, but we prefer to hit studs if we can. James Hardie recommends flashing behind the field joints, so we're using Tyvek, 6 inches wide and 1 inch down onto the next plank or the starter strip.
Happy with it there.
Perfect over here. Paint stick in.
Raise it up. That's better, but still.
I'm coming up a little bit at a time.
That's more like it right there.
Level on mine would be right about there.
I'm gonna check for level over here at this side. Oh, that looks pretty darn good. I'm gonna put a nail in.
Do it.
Feels really good across there.
A little high over there.
Then lift on that side a little bit.
Take a look.
Oh, can you put the level on just here, see if we have any sag that we need to take out?
All right, we have our second plank on, and we're level across the bottom on our first row with an 8-inch gap trim to plank. Hardie Plank recommends factory cuts in the field, so that's what we did there. Those are 2 factory cuts together. After we cut this plank, I put primer on the cut end, which is what James Hardie recommends. So now we're going to check for level as we go up, and that's how we install the first row of Hardie Plank level. Hope it helps, and happy DIYing.